What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Pitt mailbag here on the Post-Gazette Sports Podcast Network and YouTube channel. He is Chris Carter. I am Noah Hiles. Chris, it is a Victory Monday here in Pittsburgh, and it is because the Pitt Panthers, the Steelers, obviously had a bye, one football game in this city, and Pitt finally gets a win, upsetting number 14 Louisville 38-21 at home. A much-needed victory for Narduzzi's program. Chris, I mean, how are you feeling today? Obviously, a little bit of a better day for both of us on the South Side during Narduzzi's presser. Things are just a little better when this team wins.
Just a little bit. You see Pat Narduzzi be a little bit more chipper about his conversation, being very open about how you want to have leverage on certain wide receivers. It was a more football oriented conversation and less about all the things that could be dismayed about the Panthers. But yes, generally a better vibe, and I'm eager to see how the team responds throughout the week to that. I will say that when we walked in the facility, that blue vase was still sitting right there in the lobby.
Hey, actually, hang on.
Oh, no, you got a blue vase!
Yes, I do. Yes. So it's not just in the lobby. It's over here in Brookline with me as well. So we got a lot of questions to answer. Before we do, let's get into a couple of ads here. First one is, of course, our friends at Mike's Beer Bar, the show's presenting sponsor. Whether if you're in town for a Steelers, Pirates, or Pitt game, Mike's Beer Bar is right across the street from PNC Park and has the best selection of beer in town, as well as amazing food options. They have over 20 TVs, and you can catch all of your NFL, college football, Pirates, Penguins, Riverhounds, and Premier League action right at Mike's. Come on in and try one of their 500 different available beers, 300 of them being local craft beers, as well as 80 different local craft beers available on tap. You can also get a flight to try out every option you can dream of, and trust me, you won't run out of favorites because I never do, and I'm always there. Try their steak on a stone for an awesome meal where you can choose how hot you want your steak cooked with a heated stone right in front of you as you enjoy a night out in Pittsburgh. Come to Mike's Beer Bar and get your sports fix and experience the best sports bar in Pittsburgh. The show is also brought to you by the Great Yinzer Tailgate. The Great Yinzer Tailgate is bringing us the best of the Berg to South Point on November 4th, showcasing Pittsburgh's rich culture, iconic sports history, and vibrant community spirit. The Great Yinzer Tailgate will immerse you in the unique blend of traditions that make Pittsburgh legendary. Visit www.thegreatyinzertailgate.com for more details. We'll see Yins there. All right, Chris, let's get into some questions. A lot of them pertain to one specific player at one specific position. And we'll start off right here. Justin wants to know, I think the easiest layup is the hypothetical that what happens if CV, that's Christian Veilleux, had started all season. He didn't do anything amazing, but he was competent, made some plays, and kept the ball out of harm's way. So I guess that's the question, is what would this team's record be if Veilleux was the starter out of camp? I'll let you go first.
I think you could comfortably look at 4-2 or 3-3. I'm not sure they win all of their games outside of North Carolina. North Carolina is the one I think everyone can kind of agree on that they wouldn't have won that game even with him in there. But I think they win West Virginia. I think that was a game where Phil Jurkovec just put them in such a bad spot there with a lot of his mistakes and just not seeing open guys, not taking the shots that were necessarily. And again, it wasn't like West Virginia took over the entire game offensively. They also had a backup quarterback in who was not playing too great. He kind of just completed used a couple passes himself. So if Veilleux started off the season, they probably, they beat Wofford easily, but he gets some rhythm. I bet you that, I'd like to see how he builds off of this win against Wake Forest, because if he shows that he does there, that would lend itself to that they could have beaten Cincinnati in that game, even though Phil Jurkovec did end up throwing, I think, 3 touchdown passes in that game. They came late, and when the Panthers are playing catch up, if Veilleux can start hotter, that could change the tone of that game. But yeah, West Virginia, though, I think Virginia Tech could have also gone differently. At one point, they got it down to within 7 before the offense started making a lot of mistakes again. So I'll say 4-2, 3-3 at the worst.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. I think I mentioned that this team probably would be a better team had it started Veilleux out of camp in our post-game video on YouTube. I'm just reviewing it. I think there's 3 wins easily here. Right? There's the Wofford win and the Louisville win that already exist in West Virginia.
Yeah.
I think there's one definite loss, and that's North Carolina.
Yep.
The 2 that I'm kind of in the mix with are Cincinnati and Virginia Tech. Cincinnati, just because the offensive line was really bad against
Yeah.
Cincinnati. And
Mhm.
I don't know how Christian would have handled that pressure. Now, I think you could argue that Christian looked his best Saturday when he threw the deep ball, and the deep ball was there. Cincinnati was daring Pitt to
Yeah.
beat them on deep balls. And if he throws a better deep ball than Jurkovec, they maybe do win that game. But I don't know how he handles the pressure that came, especially from the interior there. I mean, no quarterback does well when they're under that much duress. But again, they were just 1 or 2 plays away, and I think that this guy seems to have 1 or 2 more plays in him than Jurkovec does right now, regardless of the opponent. So I'd give that one a maybe for a win. And the same thing for Virginia Tech, because there were a lot of problems with that game in Virginia Tech. They could not stop drones. They couldn't stop them. So I think that it would have been higher scoring. It probably would have been a shootout. But I don't know if they win that game. I think they have a better chance to win every single game they played this year. I'll say that. I'll say conservatively they're 4-2. Just I don't know. Just because he's still a raw quarterback. You have to figure that there's going to be one blunder in there. Maybe that's Cincinnati. But if that's the case, if they're 4-2, they have one conference loss right now. This season looks a lot different. They're probably ranked right now if they're 4-2 with losses to Cincinnati and North Carolina. So I don't know. Yeah. Which goes into the next question here. Do you guys think that Narduzzi waited too long to make a change at quarterback? Why do you think he waited until the bye week to bench Phil? I'll let you start again here, Chris.
I mean, I think the answer is obviously a yes right now. We brought this up when we were in Morgantown, in the booth after that game. That needed to be the game where at least Christian was given a shot, even if it meant if Christian stunk, Phil was going back in. But Christian needed a shot in that game. Phil was out of sorts by that first drive of the second half when he threw that terrible interception. That should have been, hey, Phil, you don't got it today. Let's see what Christian got. And maybe you get what they got in the second half against North Carolina and he doesn't play well. But I think if you put him in, they probably to start that game, he wins that one. I think if you make this switch, you have a good chance at beating Virginia Tech, because again they fell behind in that game, and I felt like that was a big problem. Even though Phil, his first pass of that game was very much like Veilleux's first touchdown in this past game. But I think that you would have given yourself a better shot. I think Narduzzi, and this is part of the double-edged sword that you get when he's coaching this way. He believes in his guys, and that gets so much out of them. His guys believe in him, and they want to fight for this team. They buy into things like the Blue Vase story, and they buy into the lore of the team and to fighting for each other, like that kind of stuff. But sometimes it leads to maybe leaning on a guy when they aren't the answer in that situation. And that faith, it gets rewarded, but it also punishes you. And I think that this year, that's kind of been part of the story. And last year, a lot of people will say that could have been the same part of the story if Nick Patty starts the whole year instead of Keaton Slovis. So a lot of different things could play into it. But I do agree that in the long stance that he waited too long, and that was a mistake here by Pat Narduzzi.
In a black and white world, there is logic on how Pat went about this.
Sure.
You gave the guy one whole month to prove himself. You said, this is a 6th-year senior. We brought him in out of the portal to replace our starting quarterback. He's familiar with the offense. We've been building him up all offseason. We owe it to him to give him a month to prove himself. And after that month, if things continue to go bad, we'll reassess at the bye week. And making a change at the bye, I feel like, is the most comfortable time to do it for any quarter or for any coach.
Right.
Professional, college. I mean, I know that Kenny Pickett ended up getting to start last season for the Steelers prior to the bye, but that was the narrative, right? In training camp, is that he'll probably end up being the starter after the bye week. Because that's just the easy time to ease them in. But we don't live in a black and white world. And there are some times where, you have to adjust for the situation. And You know, we don't have all the answers. I don't see Christian Veilleux practice every day. And, you know, based out of camp, this guy, Jurkovec should have been the starter out of camp. He was the more experienced guy. And if Pat was telling the truth with the numbers, you know, I think he said Phil was throwing 70% of completions in 11 on 11 throughout camp, then yeah, you go with the sixth-year guy who's throwing a 70% completion rate, who knows the offense better. But the West Virginia game should have been the time to really sit down and reevaluate things. That's where it was, where, yes, everything was bad against Cincinnati, but the biggest problem identified itself in Morgantown. And after that game, there should have been, I don't know, at least a consideration, which there didn't seem to be. And I get that Phil looked good in the first half against North Carolina, but who's to say Christian doesn't look just as good if he gets that start and doesn't have to come in cold off the bench? You know, I just think that, yeah, after West Virginia, your seasons, you're 1-2, your ACC schedule is about to get underway. You know, why didn't your team need a spark back then? Why did it take until the Louisville game for you to try to find a spark in your offense? That probably would have been the point where I think we can all agree the change should have been made. So, and in agreement with you, Carter, where that didn't have to be the end of Phil Jurkovec at that point in time, like it is now.
Right.
Like we saw him move down to number 3 on the depth chart. Again, I've heard for 2 straight weeks now he's been working with the tight ends, although Pat will never admit that. It didn't have to be the end. They could have gone back to him, but they burned every bullet they had with Phil, and now this is what happens. And it turns out that this probably should have happened a lot earlier. So
Agreed.
We move on now. Joe wants to know if Christian Veilleux follows this game with an even better performance and throttles Wake, which I fully expect. Joe fully expects this, not me or Chris. He's not speaking for us. Do you think Pitt can win out? I'll start here. No. There's a big difference between beating an opponent who, and Louisville's a good win, but let's take a look at things. Their running back got hurt, and who's their best player. They compared him to Israel Abanikanda all week last week. Narduzzi did. Mm-hmm. You saw what this Pitt team was like when it didn't have Izzy in some games. The offense was drastically impacted. So it was without its running back. Its star receiver played with a wrist brace on. So he's definitely not completely healthy. One of their starting offensive linemen, I heard, had a bad injury in pregame and didn't play. I don't know if he's out for the season, but he's going to miss extended time because he got injured in the pregame. So those 3 things right there impact that game a little bit. And I'm not taking away from what happened with Pitt. That's still a great win. But Louisville's coming off an emotional high over Notre Dame. It has a bye week coming up and then another big game against Duke. This was a perfect traffic game spot, and it's banged up. So this win over Louisville, while yes, it's nice, it does not put Pitt in a spot where I think we can just sit here and assume that they're going to be able to beat Notre Dame and Florida State in back-to-back weeks. I don't know how many teams in the country are capable of that right now. So, no, I do not think that they're going to be able to win out. I think that this team might be able to reach a bowl game. But even in that case, you're going to have to beat opponents that you're of similar caliber to, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Boston College, and you're going to have to upset another ranked team. 2 of those games are on the road, and the home one is against Florida State, who looks to be a top 5 team in the country. So my answer is no. Carter?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say. That's such a listen. This was a great win, a turnaround win, can save your season type of win, but that does not mean that you're about to go win out the rest of the season. And look, the games, you and I said this on last week's mailbag heading into this. I said, if they're going to get to bowl eligibility, they needed to beat Louisville because they're probably not going to beat Notre Dame and Florida State. I said they could steal 1 to 3 out of those games. They could steal 2 to 3 out of those games. They're not going to steal all 3 of those games from those ranked opponents. But Wake Forest, Syracuse, Boston College, Duke, all were games that I thought were very winnable for this team if they came to play. But it still has to be seen that they're going to come to play every week. This was one win. They got to build on this and be consistent. And we haven't seen this football team be consistent before. So let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's take it one step at a time. Can they beat Wake Forest? I like some of their chances. I think they got to play into it. And yes, Louisville was banged up and they had a lot of things, but you know what? Pitt's been banged up too. They're missing 4 out of their 5 starting offensive linemen. And I'm not saying that that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not saying, but I'm just saying that when we look at this team, there's a lot of factors that are going to come into play every week. This team can wildly battle its way into bowl eligibility. I said that when they were 1-4. I say that now at 2-4, but they're not winning out. I think there's a chance that they could slip in and sneak up on Notre Dame and catch them unawares and pull off a crazy upset in South Bend. If they do that, I find it very hard for them to do that again, against Florida State, unless Florida State sleeps on them. And I don't think Florida State will be sleeping on them because they're staring at a chance to earn, playoff contention there. And I think that they're going to be looking at that. So, but as far as the other games, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Boston College, and Duke, those games can be won, and if they win all 4 of those, that makes them bowl eligible, and that's a big uptick from what it was looking at 1-4.
I'll say this as we wrap up this question: if they do win out, if Pitt does win out, I would put this just one notch below the most impressive thing Pat Narduzzi has done as a head coach. I mean, you got to put a championship at number 1, but this is 1A, because when you consider not only did they go 1-4, but they lost to some not good football teams.
Mm-hmm.
Like Virginia Tech, we'll see. They might make a bowl. Cincinnati does not look very good right now. And West Virginia has been a surprise, but I still think it's going to regress to, at best, a 6-7 win team. So like it's not like they started 1-4, but lost to like Alabama, Georgia, and LSU in those games. So if they were to finish 8-4 on a 7-game win streak, I think that would be the second longest win streak in Narduzzi's tenure, and it would be the most. I think it would rival the AACC championship simply because of what this team had gone through and the road that it would take. I mean, that regular season stretch would be more impressive than any of the wins that Pitt had in its ACC title season. I mean, it would have to beat a top 5 team. A top 10 team, presumably, which Pitt didn't have to do in its ACC title season. Now, the championship's more impressive, don't get me wrong, but as far as coaching and being able to motivate a 1-4 team to finish 7 straight wins and 4 of those coming over ranked teams, I mean, that's like coach of the year stuff.
That would be an amazing. And also,
I don't think it's going to happen though.
We don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But okay, in that situation, if they won out, they'd get a decent bowl game with multiple, and that would put them right in the position to get back-to-back 3 straight 9+ win seasons. That'd be astounding. It's not happening though. Let's put that out. Let focus on Wake Forest, Pitt fans. That's the job right now.
And I mean, we could go on and on. Like it would be done with the younger players, so like they would enter next season ranked in the top 20, 15.
Crazy.
Yeah. I'm sorry to get everybody excited. 6-6 is a realistic goal. That should be the team's focus here. The fan base's focus. David has a question. He wants to know, we're officially halfway through the season. Which position group do you feel has made the most improvement since week 1? I'll start here, Chris.
Okay.
I'm going to go with linebacker. I think that, this position group, I mean, it only really lost one guy. I guess 2 if you include Tyler Wiltz. But it lost one guy, but it lost I think Servassier Dennis, for as great as Kalijah Cansey was, and he was the best football player on Pitt's team last year, I think Servassier Dennis was the most important player on Pitt's roster, just because he could do so much. He could make 10 different people's jobs easier by how well he played his position. And while Kalijah was absolutely dynamic, I just think they had so many experienced, talented players also on the defensive line that they could maybe not replicate his production, but get close to it, where, you would notice he was gone, but they would still play well. But I thought if Voss goes down and has to miss extended time, this team would have been in trouble last year. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know what to expect from the linebackers. But I'm really encouraged with what I've seen from the younger guys. The fact that Braylon Lovelace is playing this much, I've said it before, it's amazing to me that this kid was playing at Leechburg last year. He was playing against kids like me. like when I was his age, quite literally. So like to go against, just the smallest high schools in Western Pennsylvania to be scoring a touchdown in Blacksburg, Virginia after, running out to enter Sandman and stuff. That's just a crazy culture shock. I've been very impressed with his development. Kyle Lewis, I think, is an encouraging player for the future. Shane Simon continues to make impact plays. And I think no player on the defense played a better game this season than Solomon DeShields did last week. I just was incredibly impressed with how he looked in the pass rush, how he stopped the run. I mean, I guess you could argue Devonshire was pretty good last week as well. But overall, I mean, my goodness, what an effort from him. So yes, I think the linebackers have taken a tremendous step forward, considering that they lost Servassier and they've been without Bengali Kamara for half the year. They've really grown up and become a reliable part of this defense.
I agree. Linebackers are, I'd say, would be the top of my list with the way that they've stepped up. Shane Simon's been a real leader. Bengali Kamara, Lovelace has been fitting in there. They've done that well. I'll say if I'm to pick another group, the guys in front of them, the defensive line, I think that they've improved, especially in this last game. You saw a collective push from those guys to limit them, especially on some of those fourth down plays. You saw them just kicking butt across the board. DeAndre Jules, I mean, we heard about great things, out of training camp that, Pat Narduzzi was saying he could be the next number one pick. And I was like, okay, Pat, like Elijah Cansey did what he did for years before he was a first round pick. DeAndre Jules has been a backup guy who struggled for snaps for years, but Jules looked tough in that win over Louisville. And on that 4th and 1, I mean, he just controlled the line of scrimmage. Dayon Hayes has gotten better. Bam Burma and Nate Temple have gotten better. Devin Danielson. I think Devin Danielson's very much who he was, as is David Green, but you've seen more of those guys start to fit in on that defense, and that's been a huge part of this is this defensive front. I also think Sam Okunlola needs to be right in that conversation with most improved of this year. He had a really impressive sack, forced fumble that might have changed the entire course of the game when it was because Louisville was driving at that point in time and up 14-7. If he doesn't get that, do they score a touchdown? Who knows? But linebackers, defensive line, I'd say they're the most improved groups right now on this Pitt team going into week 6, week 7. So this is and that's very much the MO of Pat Narduzzi, right? The front 7 guys are going to be the ones that are the biggest playmakers, for most of the season, and they're going to be the ones that often change the game. So maybe that's a good sign for some of those Pitt teams that are coming in the future.
All right, final question here, and this is a nice, fun change of pace. Rather than talking about benching someone or, is the head coach going to leave? We'll just end on a fun note here. Brad wants to know, is the Panther the most deadly mascot in the ACC? He says he'll hang up and listen. Now, Chris, I believe there was a point in the spring season where we went through Pitt's schedule and did it and went off its record on if the Panther could beat the opposing team's mascot in a fight. But I don't think we've gone through and rated the toughest mascot. So I've done my research here. You can give your analysis. When I'm looking at the toughest mascot, I mean, the Panther holds its own. But could a Panther outlive a hurricane? No. Cats don't like water. That's simple. Could a Panther beat a wolf pack?
That's a lot of wolves.
You got to figure a pack. You're thinking at least 4 or 5. So probably not, especially, those are both, if you're on the Panthers territory, maybe, but 1 versus 5, I'll take the wolf pack. Now a Cavalier and a Seminole. Now if it's Seminoles, which is their name, or the Cavaliers, you're assuming multiple people with weapons should be able to take down one cat.
But if it's that, then we're talking Panthers. Because they're the
That is true. Okay, so 1-on-1, I will take the Panther over a Cavalier just because, you get one shot with that musket, and you better hit it.
And even if you do, it might just make it mad.
I don't know. You're reloading with gunpowder. You better hit it in the face, and you better kill it, because if not, that thing's gonna kill you. Seminole, though, I'll take a Seminole over a Panther. I mean, those guys are badass. So I would say Pitt's in the top half, but not the most intimidating. Also, like, I don't really know what powers a Blue Devil has. So if we're bringing satanic power into this, then maybe Duke has the edge over everybody, or maybe a Blue Devil controls water, and thus it could beat the Hurricanes. But I would say Miami's probably my number one in the power rankings here. Pitt holds its own against most, though. And my worst three, I would have to go, top four worst, I would go Demon Deacon, number 4. I just imagine him being an angry man who has involvement with the church. I've dealt with plenty of those as a pastor's kid. So, and then number 3, I'll go with the Cardinal, 2 with a Hokie. I mean, even when they play that soundbite of a turkey gobble at Virginia Tech, I think it's
hilarious.
Yeah. And number 1, of course, is the Syracuse Orange. Yeah. I
just get eaten by everything.
Yeah. Just, crush it, squash it. Delicious, but not intimidating. Chris, what about you? Who's your toughest ACC mascot? Who's your least tough? And where do the Panthers rank on the hierarchy?
If it's the mascot, technically, isn't it the duck at Miami? Because that's
Sebastian?
Their mascot. Yeah, because he's the mascot.
What was the question here? The most deadly mascot. Yeah, well, okay. Because
if it's the team name, that's one thing. If it's the mascot,
then I'm going Seminole. Seminole.
Yeah, I feel.
If it's physical mascot, I'm going with someone on a Seminole tribe who has a flaming bow staff and a horse.
Yeah.
So yeah. Then that's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah.
But if you're going with team name, then yeah, Hurricanes.
Yeah, the Hurricanes are just a force of nature. But yeah.
And also the Duke Blue Devil loses a lot of credibility if we're going with that specific mascot, because that's just not a tough one.
Right. There's nothing intimidating about that guy.
You probably could do my tax as well, but that's or represent me in the court of law, but not taking him in a fight.
I'll say this. I saw all of these mascots throw down at the ACC basketball tournament, and the Pitt Panther came out on top in the dance contest. So that was all I needed to see. Maybe the Pitt Panther is just the best dancing mascot of all of these out here. I think we've done enough on this topic.
Yeah,
why are we here?
I will say, I remember when that was happening. That was when Pitt was getting smoked by Duke in the ACC tournament, and I was like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? It was like the Notre Dame Fighting Irish leprechaun is like twerking and Rock is like hitting the gritty. Ugh. I mean, I don't know if the season's reached that low yet, where it's Rock the Panther gritty time at half court, while the team's trailing by 30 or whatever they were at halftime. So, Chris, I think we've said enough here on this mailbag. Any final thoughts as we wrap the show up?
Just that I'm really excited to also get Pitt basketball going. We had some very interesting availabilities recently. We'll have another one this Tuesday today. So stay tuned for all the stuff that could be going down with Pitt basketball as we get you ready for there. But there's a lot happening here on the Pitt beat on all sides. Also with Abby Schnabel covering everything else that we're not able to get to because we're real busy. But hey, stay tuned, Pitt fans. It's a big win on football side, and maybe got a big fun basketball season coming up too, while volleyball and soccer keep doing their things.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, we have another availability this week, and then next week I'll be down in Charlotte for the ACC tip-off, where we'll have more coverage there. Going to be a fun basketball season, I think, and it's going to be at least interesting for the remainder of the football season to see if this team can continue its hot streak. Well, that's all we got for Chris Carter. I'm Noah Hiles signing off, saying hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and keep tuning in to the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel and podcast network for all of your Pittsburgh sports coverage by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Take care.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our Apple Podcast channel for more podcast content. Click below for a special deal of 99 cents for a 3-month subscription to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.